Danny's heart was racing at what felt like 1,000 beats per minute. She quickly went toward the window and pressed herself against the wall as she nudged one of the slats of the blind upward. She peered out, hoping against hope that she was imagining things. But even before she saw the outline of a man disappearing around the side of her apartment building, caught by the streetlights and the swirling snow, she knew she wasn't. Danny sprinted toward her bedroom, wishing she hadn't locked her service weapon in the gun safe. It might have been good practice, but right now it felt like a foolish mistake. She rushed to the safe that was next to her bedside table and began punching in the 6-digit code to unlock it. Her fingers slipped and she keyed the last digit in wrong.
Come on!
Her fingers trembled, but seeing the scrapes on the back of her hand gave her renewed confidence. She'd survived these terrorists once. She would do it again. Her fingers danced over the keypad, and this time the lock clicked, and she dived for her weapon. It wasn't loaded. She always made it safe before locking it up. There was another sound, thudding in the hallway. Danny knew she wasn't imagining things now. Someone was coming. For her. Her weapon now loaded, Danny went looking for cover. She needed something solid, something that would absorb a beating. The couch, maybe, though faced with any serious caliber of ammunition, it would provide little resistance. The sound that filled her living room a second later was so unexpected that it nearly gave her a heart attack. It was her doorbell. The shooter was at Carter's front door. Trapp saw the events of the next few seconds playing out in his head. Carter would be asleep. The doorbell would rouse her. She would worry. Who calls on someone at their apartment in the middle of the night? She would imagine that something had happened to a family member, that the police were at her front door to deliver her some terrible news. Her mind would be dulled by sleep. She wouldn't be expecting the visitor at her door to pull a weapon or to fire. She would stumble back, blood staining her pajama top. The killer would take a step forward over her nearly lifeless corpse and fire one more bullet into her skull just to make sure. Trapp blinked, and from around the corner he heard a distant voice, muffled by the woman's front door. She sounded sleepy, just as he had imagined.
Just a second!
Trapp had to move fast. He rounded the corner, creeping low. It was a horrible operational position. The hallway was brightly lit by motion-sensitive lights, and the attacker was almost 20 feet away from him. He had maybe 30 seconds before they would flick back into darkness. But he didn't have the time. Before that, Carter would come to the front door. She'd open it, and then it would be over. Trapp began taking silent half-steps, his weapon leveled and ready to fire. The man had a pistol in his right hand, held low, almost at waist height, so that it could not be seen through the door's peephole. The man was focused so intently on Carter's front door that he had not yet noticed Trapp creeping toward him. Trapp figured he had maybe 10 seconds before Carter opened her front door, but he could not be certain that the attacker would wait. Maybe the second he heard her approach, he would fire through the door. Trapp needed to save her, now, and so he charged. Before Trapp had covered half the distance, the man glanced his way. Shock flared on the attacker's face at the sight of the armed man charging toward him. He flinched, began to turn, his weapon rising through the air. And then Carter's front door opened. The attacker's gaze snapped back, but too late. A bottle of beer smashed against the man's weapon, exploding and sending a spray of foam and broken glass battering the walls of the hallway. Then a leg swept out, knocking the man to the ground, and Danny Carter was crouching over him, her weapon pointed at the man's temple, just as Trapp arrived himself, weapon drawn.
Don't move!
She realized that her attacker wasn't the only presence in the corridor. Her gaze flicked up, and the hand holding her pistol flinched but did not draw back. Danny Carter looked up at Trapp. For a second, no recognition lay in her brilliant green eyes. And then it was there. Trapp was impressed by how well she handled the shock of the situation. When she spoke to him, her voice was mostly calm, barring a small tremor from the adrenaline that must have been surging through her veins.
We have a lot to talk about.